got your Bible, we turn to Genesis chapter 41. Appreciate the good day the Lord's give us, and I'm glad He loved me. So where would we be tonight if Jesus hadn't loved us? He loved us more than our minds can even comprehend tonight. Good to be in His house again. We won't keep you real long tonight. Everybody's probably tired. Start of the week, though, Sunday, a good way to start out being in His house. And I just hope He goes with each of us all week long. Yes, Genesis chapter 41. We're going to read one verse, verse number 56. We're going to deal with some of the other verses in Genesis chapter 41. We're going to read verse 56, and we'll deal with some of the other verses tonight. The Bible said, "And the famine was over all the face of the earth, and Joseph opened all the storehouses. And he sold unto the Egyptians, and the famine waxed sore in the land of Egypt." And it's talking about a man by the name of Joseph here in verse number 56. And we're going to talk about Joseph a little while tonight and tell you a little bit, get us up to speed what's going on here. Everybody in the building probably knows the story of Joseph. And you know, Joseph in his life, he's a wonderful picture of Jesus Christ. If you study any bit about Joseph, know anything about his life, you don't find anything bad said about Joseph anywhere in the book of Genesis or anywhere else in the Bible. You remember Joseph was the youngest son of Jacob. And the Bible tells us Jacob loved Joseph more than all of his other brothers, all of his other children. He loved Joseph so much, you'll find over in the previous chapters how he made him a coat of many colors. And it made his brothers even more jealous. I mean, they hated Joseph just because Jacob loved him. You remember Joseph had a couple of dreams when he was 17 years old. And you remember these dreams pretty much what they were telling Joseph, and he told his father and brothers about them that one day he'd rule over them. And it made the brothers even hate him that much worse. Made them hate him, made them mad. They couldn't understand why Joseph was coming up with all these things, telling them about these dreams, but it was God's plan. He would one day rule. And there was one day it came about that Joseph's brothers were out in the field working. Remember, Jacob sent Joseph out to find them, to check on them. They seen him coming a ways off, and they had a plan. They was going to get rid of Joseph. Their younger brother hated him that much that they thought about killing him to begin with. Then one of the brothers, I believe it was Reuben, talked them out of doing that. They just decided they would throw him in a pit, dry pit, didn't have any water in it, just leave him there to die. But after they threw him in the pit, remember there was some merchants came by, these Ishmaelites. They decided they would sell him to these Ishmaelites, sell Joseph. Sold him for 20 pieces of silver. And these Ishmaelites took Joseph down to Egypt. Remember, he was sold as a common slave down in Egypt, sold into Potiphar's house. And the Bible, if you'll study there, these previous chapters over here before we got to chapter 41, the Bible said several times that the Lord was with Joseph. That's the reason that he was blessed. I mean, he was a man after God's own heart. The Bible kept saying the Lord was with Joseph over and over and over. And everything he done, God blessed him. He was sold into Potiphar's house. Potiphar saw what a godly man Joseph was, and he put him over his house, put him out over all of his affairs in his house. Let him run things there, even though he was a slave to Potiphar. And you remember Potiphar had a wife that was a wicked woman, evil woman, had her eye on Joseph. The Bible said day after day after day. Wanted Joseph to lie with her. Joseph kept telling her all these things. He wouldn't do this. He wasn't that kind of man. He was a godly man. Eventually one day, remember the Bible said there was nobody in the house but them. She reached out and grabbed Joseph, tried to get him to lay with her. Remember, Joseph ran, his garment came off. And after Joseph got gone, she told a bunch of lies on him. Joseph had done all these different things toward her, didn't do anything. Remember, her husband Potiphar got mad, had him put in prison. They even put him in prison, and the warden put Joseph over the prison. The Lord was with him even in prison. Remember, he had some dreams in prison. The butler and baker had some dreams. He interpreted them to them. And remember, Pharaoh had a dream, and this dream that Pharaoh had began to bother him. And Pharaoh began to inquire if there was any man in the land that could interpret these dreams. The butler and the baker told him about Joseph. And Joseph interpreted the dream that Pharaoh had, told him there was going to be 7 years of plenty, and there was going to be a famine hit. There was going to be 7 years of famine. You remember Pharaoh put Joseph over his house and all the land of Egypt after he interpreted this dream. I mean, God had a plan for Joseph before he was ever born. And you look at Joseph's life, a lot of Joseph's life is pretty much a picture of Jesus Christ. You know, Joseph was raised up to save the house of Israel and the world from famine. And Joseph was raised up to save his people, to be God's salvation to the world. And we get into chapter number 41, Joseph had interpreted those dreams for Pharaoh about there was going to be 7 years of plenty. There was 7 years, things was going to be rain, things were going to grow. It was a time they were going to have to lay up some things, because there was going to be 7 years that there was going to be some famine. Nothing was going to grow, there was going to be no food. And look what Pharaoh does with Joseph down in verse number 55. The Bible said, when all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said unto all the Egyptians, Go unto Joseph, what he saith do you do? Now I want you to notice, number one, tonight I'm going to talk about the storehouses open tonight. And look what Pharaoh done with Joseph. Number one, Joseph opened the storehouses by royal authority. Now look, Pharaoh in verse 55 put Joseph over everything. And the Bible said in verse 55, it said, Go unto Joseph. What he saith do you do? Now, he had to open these storehouses. The only way he could do it was by royal authority. And Pharaoh told the people, said, Go unto Joseph. Now, the king was the only one. Let me say this. Nobody could approach the king either unless they went through Joseph. I mean, Joseph was over everything. Somebody had problems or dealings with the king, they had to go through Joseph. I guess he had to determine whether a problem was worthy to go talk to the king, or he could go talk to the king for him. So Joseph was sort of a type of a mediator, a go-between. You know who that sounds like? Sounds like Jesus. Bible said right there, Go unto Joseph. Bible said in John 14:6, the Bible said, Jesus saith unto him, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, and no man cometh unto the Father but by me. So Jesus is a picture of Jesus Christ. You know the only way you'll get to God is go through the mediator. I mean, these folks couldn't get to Pharaoh unless Joseph took their problem to him. He was the mediator. They had to go to him. You know the only way me and you can talk to God is go through Jesus. He's the mediator tonight. A lot of folks think they get down, we've got a direct line to God. You know, the Bible talks about also if you got iniquity in your heart, God won't hear you. So I believe a lot of our problems praying is our prayers go no farther a lot of times than the mediator. I mean, we take our prayers to the Lord. He determines whether or not they're worthy to go on into the throne room. But if we've got sin in our life and not made these things right, those prayers are going to go no farther than that. That's the reason we're supposed to repent daily. Don't let the sun go down upon our wrath. I mean, he's got Joseph set up here to take care of things. The authority came. I want you to notice what was also said there in verse 55. The Bible said, Go unto Joseph, what he saith do you do? Now the king had commanded, the Pharaoh had commanded, Joseph should be obeyed. Now Joseph was in charge, and whatever Joseph said during this time, they were to do. He was over all the land of Egypt. Now his authority came from the king. It was a royal authority. If you look around the day and time we live in human nature, most of the time we don't like authority. We don't like being told what to do. And you know, we've got a book right here, and we've got a God in heaven that we ought to be listening to through His authority. We don't like authority most of the time. John chapter 5 and verse 23, the Bible said that all men should honor the Son, even as they honor the Father. You know, the Son has the authority over me and you tonight. You know, we act like a lot of times we don't have anybody over us. But we just need to stop and slow down and think. Hey, we got Jesus. It's over us. He's our authority. He ought to be our rule. You say, how do you find this out in the pages of this Bible? It tells us how to live, how to walk, how to talk. And we ought to stop a lot of times and just ask ourselves, how much authority do we really give Jesus? How much honor do we give? Are we letting Him rule in our lives? You know, this plain, simple talk, He ought to be our boss. I mean, that's where He's at tonight. He's way above us. We're nothing. The Bible tells us we're not our own. We're bought with a price. And you know, He's worthy of all honor tonight. We ought to ask ourselves a lot of times, how long's it been since we've honored Him with authority? I mean, man, these people had to bow down to Joseph right here. They're under his authority, under his rule. I want you to notice something else in verse number 41 about Joseph. The Bible said, and Pharaoh said unto Joseph, see, I have set thee over all the land of Egypt. You know, in the land, no one but Joseph could open these storehouses. And I'll show you why in just a minute. Joseph had everything put in his hands to begin with. John 3 and verse 35, the Bible said, the Father loveth the Son, and hath given all things into His hand. Hey, Joseph had control of everything in that land. He was going to have control of the world pretty much, right at his fingertips. But you notice the Bible said there in that verse we read, the Father loveth the Son, and hath given all things into His hand. So according to that verse, all things belong to Jesus. Do you say, I've got what I've got, it's mine? We need to stop a lot of times and remember where it come from. Who give us the ability to get it? Who give us the money to make the money to give it? Who give us the health to give? Hey, I mean, you think about what's going on. Everything belongs to Jesus. All things are His. All things are in His hands. He owns it all. All the material is His. And you know, I know most of us work every day for what we get. But we need to stop at the end of the day or the start of the day and just thank Him for where it comes from. It comes from Him. You get up tomorrow to go to work, it's all because Him, because you're going. We could be in shape we couldn't go. But Joseph had everything right in his hands. I want you to notice something else, Harold, about Joseph. We said he was a good picture of Christ. You know, Joseph was a fit person to be authorized to open the storehouses. You look in verse 38 through 41, it says some good things about this man Joseph. The Bible said, and Pharaoh said unto his servants, can we find such a one in this, as this is a man in whom the Spirit of God is? And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, forasmuch as God hath showed thee all things, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. Thou shalt be over my house, and according to thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou. Now notice he was talking about how wise in verse 39 and how discreet that Joseph was. The Bible talked about him, and he's got the Spirit of God on him. And that's what Pharaoh was seeing. I mean, Pharaoh may have been a wicked man, but he's seen a man that had the Spirit of God on him. He's seen a man that had the Lord with him, things that were going good, a man that had some common sense about it. You know, this is why Joseph was chosen to open these storehouses. You know, God don't use anybody anymore, and He never has, unless they've got the Spirit upon them. God, I mean, the Spirit is something each and everybody in this building, you know, when you're saved, you're indwelled with the Holy Spirit. But we can quench that Spirit. We can push that Spirit down to where He can't work through us. He's not going to live in a house that's dirty. He ain't going to live in a house that's sick. He wants a pure house and a clean house to live in. You know, Joseph had to have God. You know, he couldn't do this by himself alone. He had a lot of plans to make. Joseph had to be a smart man, had to be an intelligent man to do the things you were doing, to plan this out, how it was going to all work. But he had the Lord with him. I believe he talked to the Lord constantly as all this was going on, how to go about it, how to do it. And you know, I feel safe to say God was showing him how to accomplish this task every step of the way. And you know, I believe every true man of God will follow God's plan just like Joseph was doing. The Bible said the Lord was with him, everything he done. Now Joseph, I want you to notice, carried out the storage in this thing. And you know, if we'd been like Joseph, we'd probably have quit before those first 7 years was up. There was a lot of hard work went into this. I mean, I don't know how much corn they had to grow, but man, it had to be a lot. They were going to feed the world. That's how the world was going to survive. Now, he didn't quit during this time. He worked. There were 7 years of plenty, and he gathered corn. The Bible said in verse number 49, and Joseph gathered corn as the sand of the sea, very much until he left numbering, for it was out without number. There was so much, they didn't even know how much they had. They quit numbering. The Bible said it was the sand of the sea. Nobody can count that. Man, I mean, they must have grown some corn there for 7 years. And I mean, you think about how they put it back, how they preserved it for that long, kept it good, where it would take care of those folks in those 7 years of famine that was going to take place. And you know, we ought to be like Joseph. We ought to be laying some things up for hard times. Because if you ain't never had a famine spiritually in your life, I guarantee you sooner or later it's coming. There's going to be a valley that you're going to wish you laid some things up that you can reach and get a hold of when that famine hits. You know, I'm afraid we're living in a day and time that we're just, to pretty much plain talk, we're getting too lazy to lay anything up. You know, there was times, man, it wasn't hard for us to come to the house of God. We'd be there every time the house of God was open. We'd work our schedule around the church. And anymore, people of the church has to work their schedule around everything coming and going to even do anything in the house of God. Man, we need to be a gathering, laying some things up. Because, man, there's going to be some times of famine hit. I don't think we've seen anything in this country yet. I mean, we still got it pretty good right now, but we're seeing some things creep in on us that we never thought we'd ever see. I mean, we got a spiritual famine right now. We got a famine of the preaching. We've got a famine of the word across this country. And you get out of these states, out into California and some places, man, they're trying to do some things right now to shut the preachers up. They're trying to pass laws, man, and they're going to check and see that what you're even going to preach. They done that in Texas a year or two ago. And it'll shock you how many churches there are even right here in North Carolina. That these men in the church checks the pastor's outline before he preaches to preach. I mean, we're going to get to the place that, man, they're trying to push things out there right now in California. You can't say nothing about the homosexuals, lesbians, or anything. It's in this book. The Bible said they was worthy of death. Look what he done to Sodom and Gomorrah. He destroyed that place over that crowd. Other things down there too. I mean, you can go over to Romans chapter 1. The Bible talks about that crowd probably having a reprobate mind. But we forget about, there's a whole list of things in Romans chapter number 1 other than them that nobody ever preaches on. A lot of things we forget about. But it's going to get to the place, there's going to be a famine hitting this country. It wouldn't shock me if you turn the news on any time, the government trying to take over everything. Trying to shut everything down. I mean, we just need to open up. We sat back and let so many things happen the last 15 or 20 years. And it's just creeped in on us. We sat back, got comfortable with it, thinking there's nothing we can do about it. We'd spoke up a long time ago. A lot of this stuff may have been pushed off to the side. Man, some of these old men that's done in heaven, some of these older preachers, man, they'd roll over if they seen the things going on right now. I mean, it's a scary time. It's a scary time for them young'uns growing up back there. I mean, they're seeing things, man, I never thought I'd see back when I was just 48 years old, be 49 in November. But there's things right now that I never thought we'd ever see. I mean, we're living in the last days, man. We're living in a time Jesus is getting ready to step out. You know, I just wondered a lot of times he may bring some chastisement on us, some punishment before he does come back. Because, man, it's getting to be a time we better be laying some things up. You better be ready. Maybe a time you won't be able to get reaching anywhere and get a hold of one of these Bibles. Maybe a time you won't be able to buy one. That's the reason we need to hide it in our heart. Put it in these children's heads so it's right there. But Joseph was authorized to open these storehouses because of his wisdom. The Bible said there's none so discreet and wise as thou art. Joseph was a man that used his head, made right decisions. And I believe he was a man that just used a lot of common sense. And you know the Bible, I mean, if you study it, it's common sense, just about every bit of it. We try to make it hard to understand a lot of times. Look for something new. But if we just use good old common sense in most of our decisions, everything would work out all right. I mean, he was chosen because of wisdom. And notice Joseph opening these storehouses. I'll be done here in just a minute. But let me say, if Joseph had just filled these houses up and didn't open them, hey, they wouldn't have been no gain to anybody. They wouldn't have been any good to anybody if he had just stored them up and never opened them. He filled them up for a purpose. And the purpose happened up here in verse 55 and 56. The Bible said, and when all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread, and Pharaoh said unto all the Egyptians, go unto Joseph, what he saith do you do? And the famine was over all the face of the earth, and Joseph opened all the storehouses, and sold unto the Egyptians, and the famine waxed sore in the land of Egypt. I don't know how many of these storehouses he had, but if you'll study your Bible, he had them in each city. Now I want you to notice he opened them at the right time. The famine was on the land. You ever stop and thought God's got a storehouse? Will be open when that spiritual famine comes if we just want it. Hey, these storehouses was opened all the time. They never closed. They were open all the time. Open all through the famine. You know, things begin to happen in this country. A lot of times in our lives, famine happens, we'll panic. We'll run every direction, coming and going, looking for the answers. But we don't run to God's storehouse. It's wide open. Hey, Joseph opened these right at the time when the famine hit. I want you to notice something else about this. And I don't find anywhere in this chapter we're reading about this famine or the next chapter of anywhere else that corn ever run out. Hey, it was enough. It was enough to get them by from one day to the next. That was physical corn. The corn for the body, the physical needs of it, so the body could grow, wouldn't die, it would nourish. The Bible said in Psalms 37:25, I've been young and now old. Yet have I not seen the righteous forsaken, nor his seed begging bread. You know, you ever stop and thought that corn was enough? It never run out. Hey, you might go down to Walmart down here in Ingles one night or at church tonight looking for something, and there's a good possibility they could be out. I've been to several stores several times looking for something specific. Go and don't have it. Go to another store that don't have it. But you know, this store is the house that Joseph had open. They never run out. But you know, the storehouse God's got, it's enough tonight because it'll never run out. You think about getting in God's storehouse. It's full and it's enough. I've always started to kind of think about His storehouse in a spiritual sense. Man, there's a big shelf of grace in there and it's enough. Shelf of mercy in there and it's enough. And you know, there's a shelf of love in there and it's more than enough to get you through anything you're going through. These storehouses that God's got, it'll never run out. It'll never be empty. And it's open all the time. Open 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, 7 days a week. And look at these storehouses, what Joseph done with them in verse 48. The Bible said, and he gathered up all the food of 7 years which were in the land of Egypt, and laid up the food in the cities. The food of the field which was round about every city laid he up in the same. Said a minute ago, the Bible said this food was laid up in every city round about. You think about what Joseph done. These storehouses were convenient. Every city, they were easy for everybody to get to. A lot of them probably didn't have to travel a long ways. It was convenient. It was easy for them to get to. You know, I'm glad tonight, man, God's got a storehouse that's convenient and it's got a ready supply. Hey, you don't have to travel a long way to get to His storehouse. You can get to His storehouse right now. Hey, you can get to His storehouse when you get out in your car, when you get home tonight. You don't have to be in the church with the preacher. You don't have to be with the deacons. Hey, you can be out in the middle of the woods. You can get in God's storehouse. It's always open. There's always enough there. Look at something else Joseph done. Joseph opened these storehouses to all comers. Verse 57, the Bible said, and all countries came unto Egypt to Joseph for to buy corn, because the famine was sore in all the lands. And all countries came unto Egypt to Joseph. Now Joseph opened these to all comers. It didn't matter who they were. Hey, it didn't matter what country they was from. It didn't matter what religion they was in. It didn't matter what color their skin was. They could come and buy corn from them so they could survive. You know, this thing we've got tonight, salvation, you know, it's open to everybody. He said, come unto me, all you that labor and are heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. He said, come unto me. That's an invitation to an entire world, not just certain groups. And there's some out there that believe that they're the only ones that God ever comes to. There's certain groups out there that believe that there's some born to be saved and some born to be lost. That's not that way. It's a whosoever will salvation. Everybody's going to have an opportunity. Everybody will have a chance. But you know, He never promised anybody that they would ever hear it over one time. Is all He promised you. But you know, most of us has heard it millions and millions of times. Most of us is second chance Christians, third chance. I mean, millions of chances over and over and over. God's given us chance after chance after chance to serve Him. But this was something for all comers. Come unto me. And you know, I don't find anywhere, and you looking in this chapter that was looking in right here about these storehouses or the people that came to them, I don't find nowhere that anybody went away empty from Joseph's storehouse. I believe everybody that went got something. You know, you ever get in God's storehouse and don't get something, it's your fault. Because, man, God wants to bless us. He wants to be a blessing to us. He wants to give to us. He wants to help us every day that He can. Hey, I don't believe anybody ever left empty from that storehouses. You know why? He's enough. You know, Joseph sold for money. But ain't you glad you get in God's storehouse and it's without money, it's free? It's nothing but grace, nothing but mercy. Hey, we can come to God's house a lot of times and leave with a lot more blessings than what we do if we just come in the right mind and the right attitude. You know, our attitude's what gets us in trouble most of the time. You know, our attitude's how we look at things, how we think about things. We come to the house of God with a good attitude, looking for Him to do something. More times than not, we can go home with a blessing. Go home with something in our heart that's helped us. Let me show you the last thing right here, and I'll be done. I told you I wasn't going to keep you long tonight. I've done told you enough about Joseph tonight to help you for a year with him. You know, Joseph was a man that acquired possessions of all Egypt for the king. You know, the people of Egypt give everything they had so they could survive. Hey, they was giving the possessions, anything they had, so they could just survive, be able to live during this time. You know, the Egyptians gave all their had, their possessions, just to preserve their life. And what they pretty much done, they surrendered to the king's wishes. You know, God requires that for me and you, total surrender. Everything we have, we're supposed to give to Him. Our life, we're supposed to give to Him. We should give our children to Him. We should give our home to Him. We should give Him the first of everything we make. Hey, He requires us to surrender to Him. A lot of folks think that's just Sunday morning, Sunday night, whenever the church doors are open. But He wants total surrender out of us every day of our life. That's why we don't get the blessing. Seems like we just want it certain days of the week. But this is a lifelong thing. 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. I mean, all through the year, just serving Him. Joseph acquired all these things from the Egyptians. But I wonder what God's acquiring for me and you. I'm afraid He's acquiring very little a lot of times. You know, we owe Him so much. We ought to be total surrendered in every way of our lives. You know, God's been good to us. He's a good God. I don't believe there's nobody, if they's really honest, could complain about how good God's been to them. I know we question some things that happen sometimes, and there's nowhere in this Bible says you can't ask God why. We all got questions. That's why we need to talk to Him. But if we'll just stay patient a lot of times, He'll show us somewhere down the road why, maybe never not. But there's some things the Bible says, the secret things belong to Him. You know, He lets us understand what we need to along the way. You know, He's been good to us. It's been good to be in His house today. Hope we've been a little bit of help to you this morning and tonight. Hope everybody has a good week. Just look for God to do some good things this week, and He'll do it. You know, He said to think on the good things, think on the pure things. We'd do those things a lot of times more. Our attitude would be a whole lot better. He's been good to us. Let's